Yeah.
Hey, everybody.
Well,
Welcome to Happily Never After. I'm Kate.
I'm Jay. Here, we're working on turning the page at the spousal loss.
So, this episode, we're really going to dive deep into the financials and the components that come with losing our spouse. I know that, Jay, you've got some really interesting things to say about it because we both
Yeah,
recently have found that in developing our businesses and kind of putting all our eggs in one basket, those finances get far more complicated. And we're kind of like, I'm at the end of my rope, like widowhood's expensive, right?
true. I mean, look, it's funny because you want to be with somebody because you love them, but then you also want to be with somebody because they can take care of you, or you can take care of them, or together you can take care of each other. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many components to all of this, but then when when something happens, you realize from the door where you are. You know, some people's incomes get cut in half, more than that,
Yeah.
and then you're dealing with that, and then the mental situation of losing somebody. So,
Well, and then
you know,
people, when you lose someone and people expect you to either pay for it, have it figured out, or maybe the opposite. Like people expected me to like completely financially fall apart and, you know, fall back to that welfare poverty mindset that I come from. And funerals are expensive. And I know tax season is coming up soon. And like filing taxes as a widow is so messed up. And I don't know what it's like for a widower, but there's a whole complicated process. Let me tell you about it.
well, in my situation, it was like, it was seriously, it was rather simple because it was very cut and dry. It was just like, I got the kids, I'm doing this, I got that.
It was like nothing
And
even happened, right?
yeah, it was almost like nothing happened in that respect. I mean, I didn't have to go through all those different things. You know,
Yeah,
I
I had 3 years of bullshit with just taxes.
and see, and it's amazing because we're tortured, you know, when our spouse dies. Then we're
Yeah.
tortured because we're in situations where we may not be able to address this or that. Then we're tortured when we get a little something to address something. Then we're tortured because the tax man is coming to take that.
Or then we're tortured because we make a decision because we need a little
Yeah,
respite. And so we go
yeah,
do a little retail therapy. And maybe we take it too far the other way, but then we're
right,
criticized or ostracized or, any of those sized words.
right. I mean, look, you know, reality is you spend your money anywhere, you know, when you're going through a situation, and you did some form of therapy. Like, what's interesting is if you spend $300 on a handbag, or if you spend $300 for 2 hours of therapy with a therapist, you know, it's like, well, that was money well spent. This is not money well spent. And don't get me wrong, therapists are needed. But what I'm saying is, at a certain point, if you can't afford either, you know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
like,
It's,
you know,
it's the struggle is real. And that's an understatement.
yeah, it's it's absolute banana.
Finances after widowhood is so bizarre because again, one, I was never the money person and coming from a
Right,
poverty mindset, I already had like trauma about looking at the bank account because it was just better to not know than see
not
the bank
no.
account in the negative. And so again, with my age difference, Craig was 20 years my senior. So I don't have daddy issues, but it was nice to have someone who felt
Right,
a little, he was the adultier adult, even though he wasn't great at managing money either. And we were never destitute, but we had, financial problems that all married couples go through, right? Like it happens. Sometimes one payment can just throw you off when you're that fucking middle class, you
yep,
know, it's the upper middle class is really where we get fucked because we pay the higher tax bracket, but we're not making enough. And then the cost of
right.
living and then kids. And all of that shit. It was just a
But let
lot.
me,
And so one thing would derail things and it would take us a month
and
or
it
two to
would
get
take,
caught back up.
Kate, let me explain something. My, what was crazy was that I was like, I told my wife, and I think that's where these things started happening. I was like, we need to look at some other things, you know, get a business, do this, do that. Her thing was like, she don't believe in that shit.
Yep.
She believed in trading time for dollars. That was her whole thing. And and then
That was me. That
it
was
got to
me.
the point. But it got worse because as I was looking to do these things, because I wasn't making a shitload of money anymore, it was like, well, you know what? All you want to do is follow your dreams. You know, you're not taking care of this family. You're not. And I'm like, no, it's not that I'm not. It's that I'm trying to take care of the family, but you guys
In
are
a different
resistant.
way than
And
her and I know
right,
how.
and it's like, and then it's like, for someone, and then it got to the point. Then my insurance shit really started kicking. Like I started making hand over fist money, and and it was like I was telling my wife, I said, but this is not an everyday thing. This is, I work in the world of insurance. Some days are going to be up, some days are going to be down. So,
Yep.
you know, and it was like, I remember when she wanted to buy the house, and I'm like, yo, we can't afford a house in this neighborhood. Let me explain something. Wendy Williams had a house there. Whoopi Goldberg got a house out there. Robert
Whoopi
Poole
lives in
Bell,
Jersey?
yeah, lives in West Orange.
No way.
Yeah,
My
she
father's aunt
lives in a
grew up
gated
next to
community.
Bill and Camilla Cosby.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just
I
like,
used to see
yeah,
Camilla at the grocery store when I was a kid because
yeah.
it was like two towns over.
And
That's
it's like,
wild. John
that
Bon
shit,
Jovi, his son goes to Deerfield Academy, so I would see his wife at like
you
the
know,
local like footwear store because Greenfield didn't have shit. There's no nothing.
and well, let me tell you, and then it's like, I mean, well, KG, the DJ from Naughty by Nature,
Yep, yep.
he got a condo out there. All these people. Now, let me explain something.
And she wanted a house in that neighborhood, and you're thinking to yourself like, ain't no way.
Well, see, here's the bad part. She had a house in that neighborhood. Her
Mm,
parents were paid. Her father was dean of medical students at a teaching college. Her
gotcha.
mom, her mom was assistant superintendent of the largest school system in New Jersey, in Newark. So they were
So do you
making
think
it.
it was like a keeping up with the Joneses, so to
It
speak? Like
wasn't. That's
she
it.
wanted to
Let me
maintain
explain
that
something. The
life she'd
house
become
we
accustomed to.
the house we bought was across the street from the house she grew up in.
No, what
Yes.
are the odds?
Now let me tell you this story real quick. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm sitting there, right? And she calls me. Got a surprise for you. And I'm at work. And I'm like, the surprise is, I hope the surprise is not we're about to have another baby. You know what I'm saying? It's like
You're
don't
like,
hit me with that one. So I come home and she's like, yeah, I got a surprise for you. So she puts her hands over my eyes and she's like, this house across the street, that's yours. 3 weeks earlier, the owner of the house, she passed away.
oh,
And there were two brothers that were the executors, you know.
mm-hmm.
And I remember my wife was like, well, we got to put a bid in on this house. I was like, we ain't got this money. But we put a bid in, real low ball bid.
Sure.
And I was like, man, we ain't selling the house. I mean, we ain't getting the house. Yo, she she put her hands over my eyes when I went home and it was like, that's your house. The older brother who was being a real asshole about it, I said, yeah. he died 2 days ago. The younger
Oh,
brother was
the
willing to
low
take the
ball offer because
money.
he just wants to be out from underneath it.
Yeah.
Shut up.
And so
Oh
I
my
was like,
God.
so we got that house on a real low ball bid, and we had to do a lot of maintenance, to
Yeah.
the house.
Yeah, that was
But
kind of ours too. Like it looked good at first glance, but then when we got in there, like shit
right,
started to fall apart like after
right,
year two.
right. It was crazy. But it was like so now I depleted my savings to get this house. So I got this house, me and my wife. My first off, my mother-in-law is like, she was telling everybody she helped us with the down payment. I was like, no. I said, you might have gave your daughter the money. You ain't give me shit. I said, so when you want to talk about help on the down payment, it wasn't help on the down payment. It was help your daughter pay for this house that she wanted.
It's so wild to me because opposite, similar but opposite. So Craig was a really proud man, right? And his father was also a state employee, worked IT for 40 years. His father got him the job at the state. He started in the mailroom, worked his way up thanks to his father. But if we like when the car got repossessed and I like reached out to my brother and got snubbed by my brother, who basically was like, grow up, don't ask me for money. I said to Craig, I was like, look, it's going to take a big man, humble yourself up and call your father, who was living high on the hog, had two houses that were paid off, all of that shit. Like, call your father because we are hurting. And he wouldn't do it. And I'm like, maybe if he had just at that point, he's like, I can't take a loan from my father. I've done that before. And just the level of shame and like not feeling
Right,
like a man having to ask his father for money. So when we finally got shit turned around and we were in that position, we're like, yeah, we bought a house. We fell in love with a house that was in the hometown that he grew up in. And we put in an offer and they accepted the offer and it was great. And then, like 2 weeks before closing, we found out the foundation was crumbling. And so Connecticut had this whole thing where it was like this big class action lawsuit against crumbling foundations. And it was going to cost $22,000 to repair the
to
foundation
fix it.
and a year because they're going to have to like jack the house up, drill out the concrete,
Right,
re-pour the
right,
foundation, level out the house. And we said to the sellers, we're like, we're not paying that. So you can either take
right.
that off the sale price or you can fix it. And so it fell apart. The deal fell apart. I had just had bariatric surgery. And so, and we lived in a condo at the time, which was contingent. The same day we got the phone call that the foundation crumbling deal fell apart, we got a call that we got an offer on our condo. So we're like, well, shit. So I'm
Right.
like 3 weeks post op, and we are running around looking at houses. We looked at like 17 houses a day for like 2 days, 3 days straight. And then we found the house in the town we finally bought in, and it was very similar to the other house. And we were like, yes, love it. It was on the high side of our budget. And that should have given us pause because it
Right.
kind of, because the property taxes in the different town were much higher. They were like 9%
Right.
higher. We paid 9 grand a year in property taxes.
Oh, let me tell you something. We paid 17.
Yeah. So the house we bought was like 350,000.
Okay.
And that's where or 375. Yeah, it was 375. And well, we lived there for 5 years when he died. I moved out on the day, 5 years to the day is the day I moved out. If that's not some shit, I don't know what is. Excuse me. But I had to have an appraisal done because he didn't have a will and we went through probate and they needed to assert if there was liquidable value.
Right.
Because of the other things we found, the septic main line, there was an in-ground pool, and we found a leak in one of the underground pipes. There was like we had water damage and like lost the downstairs bathroom and half of the finished basement. Like it just, 5 years wear and tear between two adult disabled parents, two small children, and us. There were 6 people living in that house for 5 years during COVID, which
Right.
was only part of it, but still the house that we bought for 375 appraised at 230. So we were
I can
upside
believe it.
down on the house. And
Kate.
so we had to and that was the other reason why I didn't keep it because I was like, it is a 4,000 square foot house.
Right.
It is too much house for me to keep up with. It was on 2 acres of land. Like, I ain't getting on that riding tractor. That's not happening. I'm not mowing this lawn. I'm not skimming the pool. You know, the number of times we had to pull dead squirrels and shit out of the pool filter because we
Right,
lived in the
right.
woods. Like, I live in the woods in Connecticut. Like, this is some Disney princess shit. If I sing, like, all the squirrels and shit will come out of the trees. Like, I'm just saying. Like, but it was beautiful. It was such a beautiful house because we had this beautiful tree line. There's a little brook that ran through the back and a nice yard and the in-ground pool and a raised garden. And we were off the end of a dead end cul-de-sac. So we were like down offset off the road with like the wildflowers and this big winding brick pathway. It was gorgeous, but it was not sustainable for just
Right,
me. And I was grateful that it appraised where I was under, because then that meant I didn't have
right,
to
right,
do anything, and legally not being able to sell it. There was no profit. So it's not like I could have sold it for profit, even if I
right.
did have ownership claim to it. But it meant it didn't get included in the estate. So it didn't count against
Yep,
us.
yep.
And I was able to just walk. But I was still on the hook for the property tax bill because I was a
Oh yeah.
resident. And just the cost of things that come after that loss, it is such a racket. The
Yo,
funeral
let me
costs, like
take.
you said, the funeral costs, the property costs, the probate costs, the lawyer's fees, the taxes, like having to take out a full page ad in the paper, $60 a week for 6 weeks until that closed, where the timeline expired for creditors to come forward and say, oh yeah, he owes me money. I'm like, that's cool. Let me just not buy milk for my kids this week and shit. Like,
Oh, Kate, let me tell you. It's like, all right, the series of interesting events is what I'll call them. Now, after that situation with the funeral, I'm sitting there, I'm like, holy shit. And the reason why she hit me like that was because my wife's pension had come through. And
mm,
my mother-in-law worked in the school system. So of course she knew, you know, she knew before I knew. So
mm-hmm.
so she basically starts counting my money in that respect. You know, and I never forget what she said. She said, Kim, Kim had a good pension and you ain't getting shit. That was her thing. And then so I come home and I'm just like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? The mail comes and I see the
Which is
mail,
still the worst thing to this day, to just randomly get a piece of mail addressed to them. That's a whole other conversation, but
Oh,
let me just put a
mm,
pin in that real quick.
yes, let me tell you something.
Woo.
Then this envelope came in it. And the envelope was about a proxy war that was happening between the insurance companies.
Okay.
And so I'm looking at it like they wanted me to sign this proxy. And I said, oh, I said, you know what? I had, me and Kim had that outside insurance policy. Let me call them and see if there's value on that. So I called them and they were like, Mr. Clark, uh, yeah, it's valid, no problem. All you gotta do is mail us your wife's death certificate. So I did that, and
Yep.
now when I did that, let me explain something. Between doing that and then my wife's pension, my mother-in-law was really upset. Then a week later, I get a call, and the call's from one of my neighbors. She happens to be a real estate agent too in the town, and she
Mm-hmm.
calls me. She's like, "Somebody wants to buy your house." I was
Oh,
like, "Really?" I wasn't even thinking about selling at that time,
yeah.
but then I was like, you know what? I have one daughter in college. My oldest one's in college. My youngest one is living with me, but in 2 years she'll be out, you know. So I was like, well, I'm gonna hold off for a while. So then it gets to my daughter's senior year, and that person called me back and they're like, they still want to buy your house. I was like, okay, you're gonna
So now
have
you
to
start
give
seriously
me
thinking about it.
right. Well, at this point, I was like, okay, you know, and so she comes over, the real estate agent, she's like, you got to do this, do this, do this, do this, do this.
Yep.
You know, I was like, and now at this point, also, my mother-in-law was really getting on my nerves.
Sure.
So I was like, okay. And on top of that, my father had gotten sick. He was
Mm.
in Texas. So that's why I moved to Texas. So, I go down and visit
Which good
him.
for you, because it sounds like you didn't have a really strong relationship with him, and still being the stand-up decent human being that you are, you transplanted not just like a state or a town, but you went from New Jersey to Texas to help like take care of this man.
It was, look, one thing you realize in life is that you can't be an asshole to the people that are assholes to you when they're in a bad situation.
Two wrongs do not make a right,
It just doesn't.
but three rights make a
And,
left.
right, right. But you know what? The blessing of doing that was that my father didn't have much of anything, but when he died, he had a house. And so between me and my brother, we split that. And, so I've been dealing with these type of things. And it's just
Hmm.
like, I had to think about all of the things that have happened. All of the things that happened brought me to here.
Hmm. And up
It,
to
it,
that point, there was a shift in perspective.
and it's like, you all, one thing in life is that, um, like you have all these issues that happen, and when they happen at the time, you're like, oh my God, how could this happen to me? But you're not looking at the real big picture. And the real big picture is that things are happening, and if you learn how to manage them, then you'll realize that it's not the burden, it's the blessing. And you
Hmm.
know, and I had to
But again, like
realize
we said,
too,
like not everyone has that strength to pick up that mantle. Not everyone has the strength to
right.
find that lesson versus the burden.
And I mean, and most people, I mean, unfortunately, we live in a society where, you know, um, it's more about victimhood than anything.
Hmm.
And, and the thing, it's so funny because it's like I had to think about all the things that I was ostracized about when Kim was alive became a true benefit when she died.
Yes.
And and then I was able to realize something that the people that were doing what they were doing, they weren't my friends. They was just supporting Kim. And then when Kim died, they had no one to support. So they said, fuck you.
Yep.
And and then I had to also realize something. After that, I had to change that mentality
Hmm.
because if you don't, then you become just as bad as they were.
Yep. Because then you become bitter and like
Yep.
scorned,
Yep.
and like it just it isn't healthy. It's again, it goes back to like I know we've talked about that choice to find joy, that choice to step
Yep.
forward is that same thing. It's like it would be so easy to just be an angry, broke ass, bitter alcoholic because of
Yes. Seriously.
everything that has happened. It would be so easy. But initially, I thought, everyone's like, oh my God, you're so strong. How did you do this? And I'd always say, like, I didn't have a choice. Like, I didn't have a choice.
Right.
I don't know. I never
Right.
made a choice, but I did. It is a choice. Like, I woke up every day and I chose to get out of bed. Maybe not consciously initially, but I
Right.
chose to get out of bed. And that's the first step. And then I chose to get dressed and try to
Yep.
shower regularly and
Yep.
a face
Yep.
on and try to feel human or feel alive or feel something. Just feel anything. Because at that point, you're just so numb. And
It
then you're
was
dealing with the finances on top of it, where you're just so everything is happening to you that you eventually have to make a choice. I
right.
choose what food I'm putting in my body. I choose to have a drink. I
Yeah.
choose to go to work on time and do my best to be productive
Yeah.
and communicate when I can't.
Yeah.
I choose to be present with my children. I choose to work out and take care of my body. I choose, as much as it pains me, to look at the bank account and
Yep.
not just spend, that have that like impulse buy. The other day I was
Right.
at what, like TJ Maxx or something, and I'm in the checkout line and I had grabbed like all this stuff, and funds are tight the end of this month. Like this month was been
Yeah.
hard. And here I am sitting, I'm like doing the math in my head. I'm like, yeah, I got enough to cover this. And then I'm like, but I don't need it. And so I like
Yep.
streamlined and I like stepped out of line and I put the shit back that I wasn't there for, because I was there for one
Right.
thing very
Right.
specifically that I actually
Right.
needed. And I put the other shit back. I'm like, that can wait. Or let me see if I can find that on Amazon cheaper. Or let me add that to my gift list because Mother's Day is coming. Like there's shit like that. Oh, my daughter
Yep.
doesn't need these, this really cute dress just because she doesn't wear half the shit in her closet anyway. So then I came home and I like cleaned out my closet and I consigned a bunch of stuff because I'm like, you know
Yep.
what? If it's really that tight and really that bad and I'm going to cry and
I'll
complain,
sell it.
then
Yep.
I got to do something to make a difference,
Yep.
because I can spend the little money I have right now on this bullshit, or I can go to the grocery store and, buy cheese sticks and milk and not yell at my kids for like portion
Right.
control on the snacks,
Right.
because I don't want my kids to ever deprive themselves of food if they're hungry. And I don't want to have to put them in a position where they
Yep.
ever think that or feel that. Now, let's be clear. My kids are not food insecure. They will never worry or
Right.
wonder where
Right.
food is coming from. But I'm very transparent with my kids. I'm like, that is not in the budget this month. That is not on the shopping list right now. Like, that is not what we can afford at this moment. And I will tell them that.
Let me tell you something. It's like what's interesting. Like my daughter, my youngest daughter is very physically aware of things. My
Yep.
oldest daughter, she's trying to find herself. you know.
Yeah, no, I feel that. My
And,
son doesn't really understand how much things cost, and he has a healthy appetite. He's a growing teenage boy who works out regularly. So I'm like, how in the hell have you gone through 3 pounds of cheese in like 2 weeks? And I'm glad he's snacking on that versus other garbage. Or we go
right.
through like a gallon of milk in like 3 days. I'm like, how? How in the hell? How? And they're like, oh, it's a teenage boy thing. I'm like, no, like he is an ADHD kid and he will just eat one thing until it's gone. And then there's nothing left for anybody else. And so I've started charging him. I go into his room and I hold my hand out. I'm like, you drank that whole gallon of milk in 2 days. I need $5 from you now, please. What? I'm like, stick that crowbar in your piggy bank, boy. I know you got money for Christmas.
Right.
Like, if you're not going to take accountability and responsibility and understand at 14, almost 15 years old, you're going to be an adult in 3 short years and the world is going to be wildly different for you. And that's the
Well,
benefit I have of coming from that poverty mindset, is teaching
yep.
my kids that it takes hard work. Now, sometimes I feel a little bad because I know everything I have, I earned, I worked for. Nobody gave me shit. Even the fact that Craig's life insurance bought this condo, I could have squandered it, but that was a
Yep.
choice. I made that happen.
Kate, let me tell you. Let me explain something. Like honestly, if this had happened in reverse, I'm pretty sure Kim will be out of that money. Much sooner. I mean, look,
I don't think Craig
I
would
am.
be out of it, but I'm pretty sure he would have dumped the money into saving the house, because as a
That's what
man, like
Kim would have
he
done.
wouldn't have
That's what Kim
wanted
would
to
have done.
like, yeah, that's what he wouldn't have wanted to pack and move. And
Right.
no, I've moved 26 times in my life. I'm an expert packer. I moved that 4,000 square foot house by myself basically in a weekend. And I'm talking from start to
Yeah.
finish: pack, label, move, unpack, a weekend.
Well, see, and the other part of my situation, seriously, is that honestly, Kim's mother would have dipped into the shit, and Kim would have had no problem giving it to her. I mean, honestly,
You're
but
so
being
funny. I love it.
serious, and being serious is like the bad part about it is like just getting back to the whole, you know, widower thing. It's like, yo, Kate, the fact we even have to have this kind of conversation.
And there's so much more to it. Like we're this is just
It
the tip of the iceberg.
really, really. I
Like
mean,
taxes, finances, the trauma that comes from like your financial upbringing and awareness and literacy. Like my parents didn't talk to me about money and my parents were terrible with money. So going into my marriage, I
well,
was terrible with money. And then how I
well,
handled money
here's
after he died, I was terrible with money.
Kate. Let me explain something. Kim was terrible with money because she had money.
Mm-hmm.
So for her, like for instance, like if if she couldn't find something in the cupboard, say salt or something like
Yes,
that,
you just go buy it.
she'd go buy it.
That was
And
crazy.
now,
We ended
hold
up with
up.
like three brand new oil
Yes,
fryers. And
I
I'm like,
had
why
I
do we have three fryers
I'm
that we
like,
use once a year?
I mean, I had literally once I had like 9 things of salt, you know,
He
and
also never threw anything away. So like when I moved in to the condo we lived at, he called it the purge of aught 12 because I went through every fucking cabinet and cupboard and like why do we have six sets of dishes in this tiny
yeah,
little galley kitchen? Why do you have Girl Scout cookies from 1993? I was
right.
6. Like why? They are no good. You're not going to like, well, they were Stevens, and if he comes over, I want him to know. I'm like, no, he ain't gonna eat these Girl Scout cookies.
Right.
Why do you have prescriptions from 1983? Why? Why?
Thank you.
Why?
I
So
mean,
I
it was like,
literally top to bottom, like, why do we have 3 oil fryers? We don't eat anything oil fried anymore. Why? Why do
right,
we have 6 turkey basters? Why?
right.
No, no. And so we
No.
made like a 3-day pilgrimage to the Goodwill.
Well, let me tell you, I was like, I mean, shit.
Oh my God.
It,
God love him. That man, if he
I,
didn't have it or if he couldn't find it, he would just go buy it.
and also, I also need to be clear here too. Like, you know what? It may sound bad what I'm saying about, about Kim, but you know what? It wasn't. It was. I'm
It's also a
not.
perspective thing. Like people who
It's
haven't
right,
lost
and
a spouse don't understand. I'm sure there's going to be so many
no,
people out there who hear this conversation and are like, preach.
and it's like, yeah, like we're not trying to kick our spouses' backs in at all. You know what I'm
No, like
saying?
Craig was an
It's like,
incredible person. He wasn't perfect. I
yeah,
don't put him on a pedestal. He had his flaws. Like I have my flaws. You have your
right.
flaws. Kim had her flaws. But
It's
people have flaws whether they're dead or alive. He was an incredible husband, an incredible father. We all have quirks, but you know what? There's a learning for us that we
yeah.
have to
I
go
mean,
through in identifying the people that they were now that they're not here, and this
right,
awareness as we
right.
learn. Like for me to learn to do taxes and to learn to handle the finances, I had to be like, why did he do it this way? That makes no damn sense. Or
Yep.
why the hell were we spending money every month on this bullshit? How did he talk me into this? Like,
And let me tell you, I was looking. There was so many things. Like I I cut off so much shit, and I stopped so much because I was like, we're spending money that we don't need to, and it's like, and the thing about it too is like one thing I know wealthy people, no, rich people, my
which there's a
mom,
difference.
my mother-in-law, they want to control you with money, and it's like that's how they controlled Kim. That's how they controlled
Mm.
Kim's sister. That's how they controlled, you know, my niece. I mean, for them it was all about, well, if you can't do this, what about the money? What about and that kept everybody at bay.
Yep.
Then what was crazy was when I got to the point where I ain't need your shit, you know, now all of a sudden I was the real bad guy. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I said, now, what's interesting is that all you did was talk about me because I didn't make shitloads of money or my family didn't come from privilege and all that stuff. And now that I have made all these incredible decisions, the ones you hated and laughed at me about,
Yep.
all of a sudden, it's like, you know, I'm a bad guy if I did, bad guy if I did.
You're damned
What's
if you do and
interesting,
damned if you don't.
right? And I had to realize was that what I had to realize was that, you know, unfortunately, I married into a situation that was interesting, you know,
Hmm.
and like I said, I mean, but that's where I really learned how to deal with finances because I had to learn how to manage it within my marriage, and then I had to learn how to deal with all the other voices
Hmm.
that were having something to say,
Yeah, the naysayers. And
and
so for me, I didn't learn it really until he died. It's like being 18 years old again, because I was, a young single parent living with my parents when I met Craig, and we grew up welfare, and I had no bank account. I wasn't allowed to have one
right
just because my family, specific
situation,
people,
yeah,
controlled us financially as well. So any money that was brought into the house went into the bucket and was then
yes,
distributed upon their choosing. Let's put that
right,
delicately, if that makes sense.
right. They
So
got
then,
whatever they wanted
and
in a
nobody else
nice
got
way,
anything else, right? Like it's how
right,
we had, it's how somebody had their, nails done regularly, and we had a purebred
right,
dog and took trips to Disney World a bunch of times and family vacations to Hampton Beach every year. But I never had brand new shoes and bought my
right.
school clothes at Goodwill, and couldn't afford to go away to college because I couldn't afford the down payment, and didn't have a car, and
Yep. I
didn't get my
mean,
license until I was over 21 because couldn't afford driver's ed, and Massachusetts driver's ed is mandatory. So yeah, again, I digress. But I didn't have a cell phone until I was 17 because I bought it
right.
myself, all those things. But we could have all these, other awesome
Oh,
brand new car every
Kate,
2 years. And yeah, I digress.
let me.
So I didn't have that financial literacy. And then I was 23 when I met Craig. He was 43. He'd been married, he had kids, he owned a property, he owned several cars, throughout his life. So it was like, oh yeah, again, I don't have daddy issues, but he was that adultier adult. And I just kind of
Right,
to let him, I was like, why do I need to try to learn this and pick this up if he's already got a system in place? Obviously it's working because he's still got a roof over his head.
right,
Let him handle it. And I always wanted to be a contributing member. It was important for me to like carry my own weight, but I didn't want to deal with the numbers and the math and the shit. I'm like, so if you want to do it and that makes your little heart go pitter patter, be my guest. Make the Excel
well,
sheet, track the budget, do the bank, do the taxes, you do you. I will just give you the pay stubs. That's fine. And then you tell me, like, oh shit, I can go to this grocery store and I don't have to worry about whether or not we can afford to shop at Target. Oh shit, you mean I can get new pair of shoes? Cool. And I felt spoiled. I felt like a princess.
and see the thing,
And
and
then when shit went sideways, he always had a way of rebalancing things, and we would always re we would level out. We wouldn't completely
right,
capsize, but we
right,
would level out. And then it would be rough for a couple months, and then it'd be fine, and I'd be back to that accustomed lifestyle. So then after he died, and I was like 60% hit to my income, no house, basically, like that home insecurity, food insecurity again, all of those traumas were triggered in me. And I was that 17, 18-year-old kid again, but now with
right,
two children and then my adult disabled parents. It was like having four children. It's like being an 18-year-old mom
right,
to quadruplets. And I had to, the last 3 years, learn and still learn
right,
to get comfortable with looking at the bank account and the finances. And I still make missteps. It's not great. My kids will never have to worry about whether or not there's food on the table and the heat is on. I may not be able to afford the pellets for the pellet stove, and the electric heat is expensive, but you know what? The electric heat is on and running, and I will just rack that bill up
there we go.
because this month is cold.
Yeah,
But I don't have to worry about not having heat. I don't have to worry about not having groceries. Do I want to touch my savings this month? No. But am I able to because that's what it's
right,
there for?
right,
Yes. So I'm learning that skill set over the last 3 years. It's what I should have been learning the last 10 years. I'm cramming into a very short amount of time. And everyone's like, well, why is it like that? And then I'm shamed because I don't have that literacy, or I don't have that savings, or I don't have a more robust 401k or IRA. I'm shamed as a woman. I'm
well,
classified as incompetent, or
Kate,
and it's
let
such a
me.
why. And then you layer on that gender piece, like it's such a why. Oh, you're a man and you have a good financial plan, you're a smart man. people go, "Oh, how did you know how to make all those smart decisions?" I'm
But
like, "I don't
no,
know."
that's no, let me tell you something. Here, I thought that making good financial plans, people would say, you make good financial plans. The only the only thing that's similar is the F, financial and you. That's it.
Yep.
So what I
Yeah, people give me
realized,
so much shit about not dumping the money into the house,
well, oh
and
yeah,
I'm
that
so
was it.
glad I didn't.
So yo,
Smartest thing I
everybody
ever
was
did.
like, same here. They was like, why aren't you saving the house? Why don't you live in? See,
And
my
people threw my
mother-in-law,
kids in my face about it. They're like, "How
well,
could
that's
you rip your
oh,
children out of their
oh,
home?"
let
I'm
me
like,
tell
"Because I'd like it to be
Kate,
stable for more than 6 months."
Kate, my kids were like, Daddy, you're taking us out of our house? I was like, what do you mean? She said, Mimi said that you're taking us from the
Oh
house.
my God, she told
And I
them
was,
before you did?
oh, it was,
Oh
it
no.
was, you know what? But her thing was to do everything she could to just
Sure,
make
but that's
me out.
it's a fire sale mentality, and that's a
And,
mentality I used to
but
live in.
here's what's crazy, Kate. Here's what's crazy is that now we look at the situation, and all that money and shit my mother-in-law had, now, yo, she's barely making it now.
Mm-hmm.
And a big part of it is because, my father-in-law, he passed away. And
Mm.
my mother-in-law, she was spending like a drunken sailor. And
But that seems to be a common theme with people who lose a spouse,
yeah,
is
yo,
we
big time.
we either go into that like I don't have anything and we hold it really tight,
But see,
or
the bad
we
part
go,
about it
fuck
was
it, I've got nothing left to live
she
for.
had that mentality when my father-in-law was alive. So
But was it
now it just
exacerbated? Was it
compounds.
worse? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my
And
God.
I mean, it was like, and in retrospect, like she looks at me in retrospect, and I'm sure the venom is coming out, but in the
Ooh.
back of her mind, it's like,
Well, that's
man, this
why the
guy,
venom is coming out, is because
right,
there's
right,
jealousy and resentment. And you know what? Like if she ever says it out loud, those words will taste like friggin' vinegar.
yes,
Woo-hoo.
yes,
This has been a really great conversation. And we're at the end of our time now. So we can definitely, take the feedback that we get from the comment section and plan another future episode if there's more insight that the listeners would love to get about this topic. And obviously, like I said before, we've just scratched the tip of the iceberg with the breadth and depth of the financial
true.
component to
True.
widowhood.
And then every other component attached to that
It's
financial
a
piece.
ripple effect. It really is.
And honestly, I mean, you think about it. You start looking at it and you realize that it's a spider web.
Mm.
One it's like a piece of broken glass and
7 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
yeah. And the bad part about it is you don't realize how many how the spider web spins until you really look at it
And how
and
far it reaches
yeah,
and
how far it
continues to
reached. I
reach.
mean,
Like,
and
I'm
it's
sure
like,
another 3 years from now, I'll look back and be like, damn, this is still going.
yep, yep. I
So,
mean, and the whole it doesn't stop thing, you know, and the reality is, see, when you had a spouse, you even though you told yourself you don't have any time, you still had a respite. When you're alone, you don't
mhm.
have any respite because if
Unless you
it's
pay
not
for it. And we all know that shit's expensive.
right, and you know, and it's like, but then also, see, here's the other part, Kate. We, I don't know about you, but I'm in a situation where, um, I don't like to be quote unquote comfortable for too long.
Because you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's
Yes,
suspicious. And you
and
anticipate it and you brace for impact.
and the other part about that too, the better part of that is the fact that now, you know what? I'm not sitting there in a false ass comfort zone. I'm
Hmm.
figuring shit out.
And I'm
And
more present.
yes, much more present now, you know, and that's the whole thing. I mean, there's two sides to every coin. I mean, you gotta look at it and you gotta figure out how that's how that's gonna be in that respect. I mean, look, Kate, this seriously, this is that conversation to be having because a lot of people deal with it. I mean, every every part of it. You can be that person that, you know, everything you set up or everything's been set up for you, you know,
Hmm.
but it's about how you manage it. And then also the other part is so many other people are in your fucking face and in your pocket,
People who come
you
out of the
know,
woodwork or
out of
like,
woodwork.
yeah, they will hold their hand out or have an expectation. And that's a whole other conversation for another time too.
I
So
mean, it's just, you know what? The whole thing just bananas because um you have the intention of doing everything right, doing the right way, and you're thinking you're doing everything the right way. What you're not realizing is that you're not nobody is telling you
that's
what's
it.
right or what's wrong. Unless
And then
it
when you
affects
ask,
them.
people are like, well, I can't make that decision for you. I'm like, no, but some guidance would be nice.
That's it. But you know what? Nobody has guidance for you if it's not in their best interest.
That's right. Well,
And,
and not everyone realizes that that's the filter or the mindset that they're operating
yeah,
from, but that is unfortunately the way it goes. So
we really want to thank you for listening to today's show.
if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out our previous episodes. They can be found on your favorite streaming platform.
Make sure that seriously, make sure you like it and subscribe to have access to our future content as well.
What a really great conversation today, Jay. Thank you. With grief and gratitude, I'm Kate.
And I'm Jay, and until next time.
You've been listening to Happily Never After, part of the Xvadio podcast network. You can catch every episode of Happily Never After, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.